Now, don't throw it away.
Yeah, we moved to St. Paul from Detroit Lakes, and of course, nothing cheap. We went to go to Udall first.
That was
Just check
amazing.
that out.
Wow.
And then I don't know.
I went to Florida.
And then I
That's
don't know
incredible
how
that she kept all that. Wow.
somebody said, "Oh, you should, check this
Did
out."
she? Oh, that's another gold mine. Boy, she was wonderful. Yeah, I think most people just throw them away. So really, what a gift that she had those. I think one of the frustrations about any organization is that a lot of the history is not written down. It's in people's heads.
It's too big.
And when those people get
Although I think
old,
if
they
you break
either
it down,
forget or they lie or they move, and then that history disappears.
Oh, yeah, I could have walked there.
Although Peggy Johnson and Andrew are kind of taking on the
I spent a lot of time there as an elected judge.
people
And they
archivists.
have real elections. And thankfully I got assigned there.
I don't
You
know.
had to be there
I
at
heard
4 o'clock.
did her because her dad died.
You had to get home till about 9 after.
I don't think so, but I don't know.
After cleanup and whatever.
He was like 100.
When I first signed up, it was only supposed to be like half a day. Well, then they changed it. I don't know. She made it a whole day up there.
Welcome everyone to Aging Splendidly today. Dave is not available, so it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Julie Hoff. She is the Executive Director of Daily Work, an organization she's going to tell you all about because I don't know so much myself, but I'm very interested in learning. They are located at Christ on the Capitol Hill Church, Lutheran Church location down by the Capitol. And I actually met Julie a while ago because her friend's daughter and my granddaughter were going to school together and are actually best friends. So, welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Sue. Today, I'm excited to see so many folks. As Sue said, I'm the Executive Director of Daily Work, and it's been my pleasure to have held that role since 2012, which is a pretty long time now. So I feel like I know a lot of the churches in the Midway area and beyond. But so to get started, I just wanted to see if we could do a little icebreaker. I'm going to go over here. And I'm curious if you guys could tell me how many of you know about Daily Work, just by a show of hands? A little bit. Awesome. So not too many. So this will be mostly new information for folks. That's good to know. And then, and if no, for those of you who said no, is there anything that you're particularly interested in knowing? Like, did you come today partly because you wanted to know more about Daily Work, or did you come today because you were having a good lunch and time to hang out with your friends? Both, I'm sure. But does anybody have any specific things that you're interested in knowing?
How it's changed since it began.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I will talk a little bit about that. Anybody else have anything that they're really curious about?
How do your clients qualify? How does someone get into your program?
Awesome, good. I'm getting to that too. Anything else that I should keep in mind?
Is this just in the Twin Cities area or beyond?
Yeah, pretty much just in the Twin Cities area. There's a couple caveats to that, and I'll mention that, but generally just the Twin Cities.
And maybe some information about volunteering.
Yeah, great. All right, anything else that's, and you can always bring that up. This is I'm a pretty informal kind of person. So And just out of curiosity, I know there's only a couple hands, but I know you were one of the people who knew a little bit about us. What do you know? Just that we exist, or?
I knew when you were in Our Saviors in Minneapolis.
Yep.
That's grown.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Julie, if you would repeat the comments, then.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
I was coached and I failed. The question, yeah, so I'll keep going at this point. But yes, we were originally in Our Saviors. They were one of our founding congregations, which is a good segue to our mission and our vision. And the question, like, how have we changed over the years? The words that we use for our mission have evolved over time as we keep trying to pin it down. For any of you who have worked on missions and visions, it's really hard to get everyone to agree on the right set of words that captures what you want to convey in a single sentence or so. But this is where we are today. But I would say that what we do has changed very little in some ways. But our mission is to partner with people to find quality work. And we do that through comprehensive employment services and really deep relationships. And a lot of those relationships are built with volunteers, people in our community who come in and give up an hour a day of their, a day a week of their time to work and sit with job seekers and assist them with whatever they're working through. And our vision is really that everyone has the opportunities and connections to shape their futures. And that one was a hard one to figure out the exact words to, but I think that when I think about that, I think about the fact that employment is kind of foundational to our ability to have a choice-filled life. Because when you don't have enough money, you don't get to have the same choices about how you spend your time, about what you provide for your kids, being able to send your kids to whatever school you're interested in sending them to within reason, of course, and then also just being able that they can go on field trips or enroll in after-school leagues and stuff like that, to be able to go to school yourself. So work is kind of the foundation for all of those things in most people's lives. And it leads to that meaningful choice where you can pursue the things that make you feel full, like whole as a human being. And so that's what we imagine those words to mean. And this year we're celebrating 25 years. So it's a pretty big deal for us. We were founded by a group of mostly pastors in the Midway, Summit University, Frogtown, and then Our Saviors in Minneapolis. And those included Christ on Capitol Hill, which we're still housed out of, First Lutheran, which is up by Metro State, Hmong Community Lutheran, Holy Trinity, Lutheran Church of the Redeemer up on Dale, Our Saviors, San Martin Lutheran Church, and then Zion Lutheran. And I think a couple of those aren't even around anymore. And then nearly St. Anthony Park Lutheran was involved very early on, but not quite a founder. And so that was in 2000, and then we began as a ministry to provide greater support to people with complex barriers to work. So these people in their congregations, these pastors, were seeing folks that were just, they had a lot of immigrant members coming in. There's a lot of Hmong members still coming in at around the time we were founded, and immigrant communities were growing in this area. And a lot of them couldn't fully participate in the activities of the church because they were working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And those pastors came together and said, well, what can we do to support them? And they originally went to the city. I think the workforce centers were just being founded about that time. They met with the mayor. Isaiah was a part of all of this too. And they advocated, like, well, how do you think you can help our folks? Do you think you can help them? And the city officials and the county officials all said, yes, we can do this. And at least according to Jim Erlinson, they referred a bunch of people to the different programming things that were in place, and they failed to get any interviews for any of the people referred. That was about 12 folks. And they thought, well, what are we going to do about this? Because this isn't working. And of course, the things that were getting in the way of that working is that government, well, I wouldn't say that generally, but in general, I think these systems that we have are set up to try to be efficient. They're set up to try to be able to support the greatest number of people in the least timely way. And so that meant that you could go to a class to learn about how to write a resume, or that you could go to a class about networking. But you were doing that with a group of people. And if you were new to the United States and you didn't speak English, you know, a class on how to write a resume was really pretty far down the list of things that you needed. And especially if you were struggling with poverty or any of the other myriad of issues that people are struggling with, transportation, childcare, healthcare, you name it, they weren't able to get those needs met in a resume class either. And all those things were interfering with their ability to find and keep work. We existed in that way with volunteers from the church for about 5 or 6 years. And then we were kind of quiet for a couple of years. And then in 2005, they started working on becoming a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That happened in 2006, and we continue to exist in that form today. I wanted to pop back just because I like what Jim Erlinson says here. But part of the reason daily work is named as it is that name, daily work, is from Luther's first catechism, where he talks about your daily bread and your daily needs and your daily work. And so he talks about how the promise of the gospel is that God wants to transform lives. And one way to do that is through meaningful work that offers a future. And helping people find that work is a tangible way to love the gospel and not just speak it. And he said that recently for a newsletter of ours that's going to be coming out in the next week or so. But I thought that was a really powerful statement. So, mission and work, what's the same? I would say the things that, like the vision, the way we approach the work, the personal nature of how we approach the work is very similar to how it was. I mean, we have been building really meaningful relationships. I have people that are still coming to daily work who were coming as early as 2006 or 7. I have volunteers that have been volunteers since it was founded. So people who come in contact with daily work build really deep and meaningful relationships with us, and that includes our job seekers. And that was true even as the founders were getting started. It was people like you and your churches who were just coming in and trying to offer their experience and wisdom about how stuff works here in the US, and then helping folks apply for jobs because most of them didn't have computer skills. And again, that English language barrier was a big obstacle for so many people. What's different, I think that the difference is that daily work is really trying to cover an even greater scope of needs than we have over the years. In the last couple of years, we've seen a dramatic increase in new arrivals. That started, for us at least, with the arrivals of the Afghan evacuees. We started serving Afghan evacuees in 2022. And that has led to a big shift. Before Afghan evacuees came for us, we weren't really using any interpreters to provide our services. Now 30% of our clients use interpreters, which comes at a pretty big cost. Oftentimes I'm in the neighborhood of $20,000 a year to support those folks. Now 30% of the folks that we are serving are brand new to the United States. Whether they're refugees or asylum seekers, they're very new and have very little knowledge about how systems work here. And that has the thing that changes that is it makes our work much more, people need a lot more. Like, we're helping people get signed up for public benefits. Refugees, as many of you might know, only get about 3 months of benefits. Even when the refugee resettlement dollars were in place, it was still only 3 months. So now that those resettlement dollars are gone, people who got cut off in those, and even still then, people needed that help to get those benefits once they were cut off from them. Because let's face it, 3 months is not much time to learn a new culture, to learn a new language, to figure out what you need to do to actually hold a reasonable job. And then, will that job actually pay enough money that you can do what you need to do? And a lot of our families from other places have a lot of kids. Afghans in particular, we serve people with 12, 13, 14 kids at times. So the housing for folks in that situation is very expensive, as you can imagine. I'm going to take a sip of water. Sorry, guys. And then, so since COVID ended, we've seen a 92% increase in the number of people we serve. We're maxed out at about 250 people a year. That's kind of about the number we're in. Last year we saw 260. 2 years ago in 23 we saw 260. Last year we saw 242. I mean, that's kind of where we are, and most of that's just due to the amount of space we have. We don't have a ton of space. When I started, this was our little space. It was one little room. You can kind of see that there were 2 cubes there, and then if I went to the other corner, that was, we had 2 cubes up there. It was pretty little. A lot of you might have remembered Southeast Asian Ministry. We absorbed their space when they decided to close their doors in 2012, and then we built that out to look like this. So this is what we look like today. And we're still pretty small. We have about 3.4 full-time equivalent staff, and then over 7,000 hours a year of volunteer power. So that's effectively doubles our staff size. But still, we run pretty lean. And a lot of those hours are also from social work interns, who we really think of as part of our mission. More than 50%, at least since I've been there, more than 50% of the students that come to us are also immigrants, or at least people of color. And they are working towards a living wage career in the same way that our job seekers are. And so we take that part of serving them very seriously. They aren't just free labor. They are people who come in that we invest a lot of time, energy, and money into to make sure that they're getting the skills and information that they need to be able to be effective social workers, because they're going to be on the front lines working with way more people than Daily Work will ever work with. So we take that very seriously. Our folks, the other thing that I think sets Daily Work apart is that we take an approach that everything in our lives is connected, particularly to employment. And if you all think back to a moment when you might have been starting a job, one of the first things you thought about is, what's my commute going to be? How do I get there? And so that's the same thing for our job seekers, although most of them, well, half of them, are dealing with not having cars. So that changes the whole equation, because so many jobs that might be good jobs for you also aren't on bus lines. And then everything else you can think of, like, what's my schedule? How does that impact if I have other family members that need my care or attention? How much is it going to cost me to get to work? What do I have to wear? Probably many of you remember when you retired, like, oh, this wardrobe thing was expensive, and so was lunch, right? And because we all fail at some point to take our lunch, even though that might be our best intention. So all of these things come together and impact somebody's life. And if one of them isn't working, it can severely undermine someone's ability to find a job or keep it, because suddenly they have things that are coming up, they're not making it to work. And in the US, we have a very low tolerance level for people not making it to work, especially in the first 6 months to a year of their employment. And so at Daily Work, we're trying to think about how all those puzzle pieces connect, because otherwise our folks aren't going to be able to keep a job. And in some ways, the yo-yo of having a job, not having a job is almost harder for people than being in one place, because then your benefits aren't moving around and all of those things. So we really try to look at the whole picture of somebody's life. 71% of the people who come to us at first are unemployed. So that's another barrier to work, because anybody who doesn't have a job, it's twice as hard to get a job if you don't have one. Having a job is a stamp that says somebody hired me and I've been able to stay there. And if you don't have that, there's always a question in employers' minds. We have no eligibility criteria beyond employment goals, so we're open to just about everybody, and we don't take government funding to support our work. Well, that's a strong statement. We don't have government funding to support our work. I would prefer to not have government funding to support our work, just because the government says you have to do things this way or that way, and they have rules and regulations just like they do for everything else. And at Daily Work, we want to be able to meet people where they are. And if that's not within the government's parameters, we don't want to have to follow it. So it's just easier, honestly, in a lot of ways. It keeps us small, but but it's a better, but it gives us more flexibility. The other thing it does is that it makes it possible for our services to complement and not compete with other service providers. So some of our folks are working with other service providers. Sometimes they're even getting Ramsey County assistance because they have some requirements for people to, when they get certain benefits, that they have to work with an employment counselor. But those employment counselors might be meeting with them once a month, whereas Daily Work can meet with them 1 to 2 times a week if needed. So we're often complementing those services, and therefore a lot of people in other agencies are referral partners to us. So groups like Hired and Project for Pride in Living and Ramsey County, community health workers, other groups that serve asylum seekers or other folks like Center for Victims of Torture and so forth refer people to us. And then we're really participant driven. Meaning that we listen to what people want. And sometimes the way that one of the people that we're working with thinks is the best route to go isn't maybe the way we go about it for ourselves. But that doesn't really matter because we want to work with where people are. And so we respect that people know the best path to getting what they need and being successful. And sometimes that's hard to do. We certainly will inform them of things that we think might be difficult, but we want to work with them where they are. And one of the most meaningful ways that shows up is people who have more education. Oftentimes I've been told by folks that come in, they'll say, well, they told me, especially this was very true with the Afghans, because there was this flood of people that came into the community and there was a huge focus on getting Afghans employment as quickly as possible. And some of my job seekers would come to me and say, yeah, they told me to take this job in manufacturing, but I have a master's degree. I can do something different. And we really tried to honor that for people. And one of them told us that Daily Work was the first place that listened to what he wanted. And today he works for Community Action in Ramsey County and is doing great things with their Head Start program. Hopefully that will continue. Yeah, so that's part of that picture, is just being able to honor where people are at and not just saying, you have to go get this job because that's the only job you can get. And then the other piece that we talk about is uncommon commitment. And what we mean by that is when we approach a situation, we try to say, let's see what's possible. I mean, some situations are really hard to resolve. I mean, sometimes people need car repairs. Really hard to get money for car repairs. Sometimes there's just all these different obstacles that get in the way. But we try to work with our partners. We try to work internally to solve problems that other people can't. I mean, a few years ago, we had a fellow that had a really bad bed bug infestation. And like to the point where he'd come in with welts. His kids had welts. They were really struggling in school because of it. And we raised $1,800 to, get what he needed to get those bed bugs gone. So things that are kind of weird, we try to say, how can we get this done? Oh, time for video. Anyhow, one of the ways that I think you can best hear that is through the voice of one of our job seekers, and this is one of my favorite job seekers. Her name is Marva, and she is from Afghanistan, and she's just going to tell you about what her experience was with Daily Work.
Everything is hard when you move from the different country to different country. It's harder too because everything is different and you need some people to help you to get life easier, to reach out your dream easier, and the Daily Work is that person. When I came here, we have difficult things. At the first, I didn't know English on that times, and it was too hard because when I went to the hospital or something like that, when go to school, and it was hard to speak English. So when I started from the zero. I didn't know any word of English, and I am now here, and it makes me confident I can do it more better and better. In Afghanistan, it's different because you don't have too much opportunity, especially for the women's. Yeah, the boys can do everything they want, but the women's not. They just can work at home or some office, and that was really hard. And when I came here, I just say I want to study fashion and design. I want to design the Afghani clothes because I am Afghan and I have a own business in the future. I was looking to study here, but when I went to the college and they said you are not citizen, you cannot study here, and I just disappointed and leave it. And after that, I just looking for the job, and I get a job, and that was too hard because I didn't know about the like Google Maps, and I just spent in the street like an hour to find the bus station. And after that, I said, okay, you can work your all life, but you have to study too. And I just went to the college again. I just say, I want to study here. And they said the same thing, you cannot study here. I say, okay, I want to study here. Every day I just went to college and say, I want to study here, I want to study here. And they said, no, no, no. And then I jumped to daily work and say, I want to study. And so daily work give me a computer because I really need a computer. And that's really good because then I just look at the website and they said like Afghani people can study in the college if they have like parole case or asylum in the process. And I just show them, it's like you write this here, it means I can study here. And they said, okay, you can study here. And I'm at the college now, and now I'm playing soccer and there. I just follow my dream here. I was looking for the house, and I went there and I met Jolie there, and I just talked with her. She is helping me to like find a new apartment, and that be a good area because that I need to new job too. And she helped me to apply for the new job, and she did apply for the new job, and I had phone interview for that too. She helping me with driving practice. She make the appointment for me, and I will get my driving license and I will drive. Yeah, she helped me a lot. I would say help daily work because they are helping me to reach my dream. Yeah, because if I have problem and nobody help me, I cannot reach to my dream. If I have some people like daily work help me, I will reach out my dream sooner. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so that video was filmed in 2023. So at the time of filming, Marva had spent about a little less than 2 years learning English. So pretty amazing ability to learn a new language. And she's super tenacious. So it's really fun to support somebody like Marva because, you know, you just kind of go, okay, go this way and help her get to the things that she needs. She's a licensed driver today. She and her sister still come. Her sister is trying to get into medical school. Well, not quite medical school. She's in the process of getting her undergraduate degree, but she'd like to go to medical school when that's all done. And yeah, I'm just excited to see where they go. But those are the kinds of stories that make being at Daily Work so meaningful, and also how you can see the importance of what it means to be able to support people in our community to have a chance to reach their potential. At the end of the day, it's up to them where they go and how far they go, but none of us got to where we are by ourselves, right? I mean, we had either parents or other family members, friends, whoever it is, school teachers, people in our communities and in our lives that helped us answer the same kinds of questions that we're helping to answer for our folks. And so we all need that. And the difference for a lot of our folks is they just don't have those people in their lives. and they have to turn to daily work to help them. Or if they do have those people in terms of social supports, like somebody like Marva, she has a big family, she has other people that support her that way, but none of her family members knew that stuff. They were all brand new here. And so that's what we try to do, and we do that through four ways primarily. We do that with that individual case management. We meet one-to-one with people for at least an hour a week. That varies as their needs vary. And we try to be really responsive, which means sometimes people call us up and say, hey, I got an interview, can somebody give me a ride? And we're trying to figure that out the day it happens. And then that's where all of this stuff that I'm talking about, this whole holistic approach comes in, where we're talking about everything that's impacting somebody and then working with them to figure out what they need to keep going. And a job, of course, is just the beginning. Marva was talking about that she had a job, but she wants these other things too. So, it's the platform for starting to take the steps you need to get to a life where you have what you need and can move forward. Our Technology Essentials Core Initiative, Marva talked a little bit about that. We give out laptops to people who need to have tech access or learn to use the tech. And that includes internet access and setup and ongoing support as much as they need. That started in the COVID time for obvious reasons and continues today. Prosperity Ready is new to us, but it's been something we've been seeing a gap for in our community for a really long time, which is to support degreed immigrants and being able to get the skills and resources they need to get jobs that are commensurate with their skills. At this point in my history with Daily Work, which is pretty long, most of the job seekers that have come to us with really advanced degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, have started completely over. So I have people literally that went back to getting a bachelor's degree, master's degree, and now are finishing PhDs, mostly in healthcare fields, because they know that that's where there is reliable, sound jobs that pay well. But it's kind of, it's really disheartening to think that somebody has to go through 12 years of education somewhere else and then come back here and repeat that. But it's amazing that they are willing and able to do that. And they're doing that while they're balancing kids and families and all these other pieces. And of course, they're doing it while they work, because nobody's going there just without a job. They've got to support all these folks. And then lastly, the thing that I talked about earlier is the community impact training for both interns and volunteers. Our volunteers will tell you that they come away with as much as they feel like they give, and maybe more. And interns, same thing. We're preparing them for careers. For volunteers, we're hoping they come away with a broader understanding of the things that impact someone's ability to get a job. And I'll tell you, I don't think any one of them would ever come in and go, gosh, I did not realize how difficult this is. Because we just don't, as people who are born here, as people who are white, we haven't dealt with the system in the same way that other people do. And we just haven't experienced the same level of barrier. So every so often we'll see it. We all have stories about the Department of Vehicle Services, where they had some rule and they made you come back 15 times or something like that. But generally, we experience those types of issues in a far different way than our clients do, especially if they are English language learners. And just in case you're interested, we do a Zoom, we just started up last month, a Zoom chat to talk about different reading materials around race and equity. And it's really a space to come in and just share your reflection. And then that's the way that we kind of learn from each other. We listen to each other's reflections. If there's time for discussion, we might engage in discussion, but it's really more about being able to hear from other people and that you can speak uninterrupted and learn through that way. And it's a very equitable way to kind of engage in conversation. Because we all know that there's always, some people like to talk in a group and some people don't. And this is a way that everybody can come and share what they've experienced from the reading material, which of course are all related to race and equity issues. This month we're doing, it's on May 3rd, we're doing so what is it called? The impact of intersectionality. I can't remember. There's a word in there that's not impact. And it's by Kimberly Crenshaw. It's a TED Talk. It's on our website if that interests you. Oh, and just some fun pictures. we help people get their citizenship. We help people get their driver's license. That's what he's holding up there. He just passed. The guy there had just gotten a job at Chipotle, so he's standing in front of the Chipotle. This little picture of the apartment, they were sleeping on that single bed in that apartment, and we supported them in getting, a desk, a chair, a dresser, so that they had some place to actually, so they could come home and have a place to sit. The family up here was featured in our video last year, and they were the first family that we assisted comprehensively who were asylum seekers. So they came to us and they said, we heard that you could help us. They didn't have work authorization at that point. We found pro bono attorneys to support them. They got them through all those applications. The majority of the family members now have driver's licenses. They're working, going to school. The younger folks are going to school. And that was our first introduction to just all of the ins and outs of dealing with all the legal issues related to immigration. And so it was a huge learning curve for us. And that, I think, is part of what spurred more people referring people to us, because then we were a part of these conversations with these different groups that were serving asylum seekers, and they could see that we were effective in being able to support folks. So it's really amazing that they are thriving today and have a safe place to live, and all of those things. I put some numbers on your in front of your place settings, and our newsletter is coming out next week, so this is just the inside of that. But this kind of just gives you a little breakdown of where we are. Last year, 242 people, over 1,600 appointments. We had room for about 30% more than that, but about 30% of the folks that we have an appointment for have to cancel for some reason. So pretty equal split between men and women. Same thing with households with kids. The number of immigrants we're serving is continuing to go up. We're at 76% last year. 33% of those had been in the U.S. for less than 2 years, and 30% needed an interpreter. 22% of the folks we served were over 55, and then, of course, 91% of the folks that we were working with when at intake had incomes below the poverty line. And we serve a question about counties. We serve all of the metro counties, area counties. Plus, we had a couple people, one from Scott, a couple from Scott, a couple from Pierce in Wisconsin, and then this is the breakdown of the folks we serve. So the vast majority of the people that we serve are either African or African American or Black, and then the next highest percentage of people are people from the U.S. And then after that, just 1% less, 12% of the folks we served are Middle Eastern. That's still a lot of Afghans coming to us for referrals. The number that jumped for us last year, which is probably not surprising, is that we historically have not served a ton of Latino folks. Usually it's somewhere around 3 or 4%, and that jumped to 9% last year with so many people coming from Ecuador. And then a very small percentage of folks that are Southeast Asian or East or Southeast Asian. Barriers, we've talked a little bit about that, but our 71% of our folks are unemployed at intake. 45% have almost no computer skills. 25% had no high school diploma or GED. 12% had health concerns that were impacting their ability to work, and then 9% had legal records. People tell us that they really appreciate our services. So year over year, we've been doing this for about 3 years. Usually over 90% of the people we're usually really close to 90% on all these things, that they felt listened to, they're more hopeful about their future, that daily work helped them with more than they came in to get help with, and then our satisfaction scores are pretty high too. I'm going to come back to this. I wanted to, I have a little pivot, but I wanted to share when I was getting ready to come this morning, one of our volunteers wrote this really meaningful reflection about his experience, and I wanted to share it with you. It's a smidge long, so it's probably going to take me about 4 minutes to get through it. Is that okay? His name is Vince, and he's been a volunteer with us since 2017. And he's one of those folks that comes in one day a week, has an entire day that he comes in, 6 hours. He starts at 8, usually ends at 2:30 or so, meets with about 6 people. He can really meet with a lot of people in that short period of time. And here's what he said. This is from 2019 that he wrote this. He said, "I learned recently that one of my daily work job seekers died. He was kind and generous and liked to joke. He was also unreasonably impatient and easily frustrated. He failed to deal with his own health problems, and he died alone in his apartment, and I could not save him. He was sitting in his chair watching TV when the apartment manager found him. I wanted this job seeker to feel respected and loved. I wanted him to have what he needed to live a dignified life, and Daily Work helped him get a job, public housing, a van, and a variety of other support benefits. He worked part-time as a janitor, and the many programs and forms of charity Daily Work helped him access kept him off the streets. But he would have preferred a job that paid him enough to be able to take care of himself. And you might conclude that he was lucky to have the things he had, and some people saw him and said he got what he deserved. But I am more certain than ever that everyone deserves what they need. I wanted my job seeker to know God's grace through our relationship. He was adamant that he did not know God or believe there was a God. However, he accepted the grace and love that I offered, and he was my friend, and I will miss him. When I think of him, when I think about the difference between charity and justice, the difference between charity and justice comes to mind. I believe that God demands of us justice, not charity. In the book of Matthew, chapter 26, verse 11, it says, "The poor you will have with you always." I don't believe this suggests that poverty is inevitable, but rather insists that poverty can and should be ended. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said this about the need for justice: "A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not constantly be beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." Dr. King was assassinated not when he talked about a dream, but when he dared to challenge the economic injustices and organize the Poor People's Campaign. David Dark, a professor at Belmont University, writes, "The American economy is not an economy that makes it possible for everyone to access what they need to simply live, let alone thrive. We see that the arrangement we have settled for and agreed to is not just. This injustice is especially clear," this is my ad, because it reminded me of our situation with immigration and so many other things today. "This injustice is especially clear in the experiences of immigrants. Many come to the U.S. seeking safety and opportunity, fleeing violence and poverty and persecution, spending decades, literally decades, in refugee camps, only to encounter systemic barriers that make it nearly impossible to rebuild their lives. At the border, we see people criminalized for seeking asylum, families separated, basic human rights denied, and for those who make it through the road, the road does not get easier, just more red tape, low wages, and housing insecurity. I'm passionate about Daily Work's vision." This is Vince again. "I'm passionate about Daily Work's vision that everyone deserves the chance to support themselves through meaningful work. That includes our immigrant neighbors who bring resilience, skills, and hope for a better future. I implore all of us to take up the challenge to change the American systems of work, healthcare, and housing. And we must try harder, think bigger, and fight with all of our hearts so that everyone, whether arriving at the border or already here, can live with dignity, as my friend so desperately deserved." I knew this guy really well, too. Anyhow, I think we're kind of in that revolution right now. We are in tough times in America, and part of the problem with the immigration problem is that it has never been a just system. It was based on, what was happening during World War II and the reasons that people needed to flee at those times, and that's not how it is anymore. We have a lot of other issues facing people and why there's so much more world migration. And basically, you know, the whole system needs restructuring on so many levels, whether it's immigration, whether it's how we handle poverty in America. And I think that that's the moment we're in, that we have this call to figure out how we're going to solve this. And right now it's going to be one side or another. Do we want to become a more just nation, or do we want to go down a different path? And so I think that it's an especially meaningful time to think about that. And with the last 15 minutes, I do have some volunteer slides and stuff like that, and I'll put them up for you. But I think with the last 15 minutes, I'd love to hear your reflections and, you know, just open it up for questions and conversations. And as you can see, you know, our volunteers really feel passionate.
How do you deal with the ESL, English as a second language?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you deal with ESL? So we use a lot of interpreters for folks who can't, who need them at daily work specifically. And then for the most part, we refer people to those services. There's a lot of great English language learning schools. One of the things that we have a little dream for, and that we're starting to explore with a couple of our English language school partners, is being able to have our staff come into their sites and provide services there. Another way that we could truly meet people where they are. We think that that's the best way to grow our services. It's aligned with our mission. We think of ourselves as more of a bicycle than a big truck, which means we can get around a little more easily. And I think that that's, you know, we don't need to be another PPL, Project for Pride and Living. We don't need to be another Avivo. These are some of the big agencies that do this work in kind of one place most of the time. We need to go to where people are. And our English language school partners are on the front lines of all of the cuts to refugee resettlement, because that's where a lot of those people were getting services. And they're coming in and they're saying, I need help with employment, I need help with all these things that have now, for many of them, gone away. Some of the agencies were able to sustain those services, but you know, it's questionable as to how long that will happen. Others just had to cut them off immediately. As you all know, Lutheran Social Services laid off 27 people pretty fast recently. And those 27 people is a lot of people. They aren't replacing those services to those clients with existing staff.
Can you talk a little bit about what an immigrant has to go through to get either a work permit or a visa? I mean, they can't just walk in and get a job. It's more complicated, right? So
Yeah.
help us understand that.
Yeah, so the U.S. has a policy that you can come to the border and say, I feel like I can't live in my current country anymore. And the main reasons are for that you are being persecuted in some way by the government. Again, this stemmed from World War II and what was happening in Germany. And so if you come in, you say that, and they will give you permission. A lot of people that go through that process at the border, they'll give you permission to come into the country. You'll get some documents called an I-94 and some other things. And then you will have 1 year from the date of arrival to apply for asylum. If you miss that 1 year, there's almost no way you will get asylum. It's a really hard deadline. And most people can't get through the asylum process. I mean, like 70% of asylum requests are denied anyways. And under Biden, it maybe went up to 40 or 45. But traditionally, because again, the criteria for asylum are based on what was happening during World War II. And a lot of people are coming here for different reasons. The other thing is that you have to be able to prove it. And so the family that I talked about earlier, they came from Turkey. And their home was almost in the heart of where the big earthquake hit. And so even if they wanted to prove all these things that were happening to them, public records were gone. Everything, so many things were decimated. So other folks that I recently worked with somebody, this is a little off topic, but another group that we worked with they came through the refugee system, and so then there's support for that. But they've done the waiting outside of the country. That's the difference between refugees and asylees, is basically refugees have been displaced or knew that they had to flee. They fled to another country. They were allowed to stay in a refugee camp, and then they said, I want to go somewhere else. And then they get to create like 3 choices of different countries that they would go to, and then they wait for someone to have an opening. I've worked with people who have easily waited more than a decade. One of our keynote speaker, in fact, at our event coming up on May 20th, his family was scheduled to fly out of their country that they were living in a refugee camp for 25 years on January 21st. Trump took office and made these changes on January 20th. Imagine what that is like. His family is not here, obviously. So refugees come with all those documents, but this family had decided to move from New York to Minnesota, but their work authorization card had not yet arrived. So it got sent back to USCIS, United States Immigration Services, and they are very slow at processing everything, which is why we have a backlog. You know, we have one client at Daily Work that's been in the asylum process since 2017 and is still waiting to have her court case heard, which is now really scary. I mean, one of the things that's scary about that is, like, you know, these cases are going to be being turned down. They were already being turned down. And now we have a woman who's been here for 8, 9 years. Her kids basically only know this. They've grown up here. They're settled. She's a licensed nurse. She's working on her RN. I mean, these things are super disruptive to people's lives. They shatter them. Anyhow, so they came with those documents, but they didn't have that work authorization card. And so we wanted to be able to go with them to get a Minnesota State ID card. So they would have they have a Social Security card, because that's what refugees have as soon as they come. And they just needed a government ID to be able to qualify for work, because you have to submit the I-9 when you are employed, which is the thing that says, hey, I'm legal to work here. It basically proves that with a photo that with your Social Security card proves to employers that you're legal to work here. So we thought, well, that's easy enough. We'll just get them a Minnesota State ID while we wait for this. Well, these folks have lived for over a decade in a refugee camp. They didn't have any of those papers. They had nothing. You know, they don't have anything that is on the list of required documents that our state asks for to get a Minnesota State ID. And yet they could fly on a plane with the paperwork they had because it was issued by the federal government. But it's not the stuff that we want at the DVS, which we all know how rigid the DVS is. So anyhow, it ended up taking about 4 or 5 months to get those documents. And the funny part is that the husband's card came right away. So we applied, we found somebody, we went to a couple of different DMVs. One place processed it. Literally, we called a refugee resettlement partner and said, hey, how have you guys handled this? And they said, some DVSs will process it, some won't. You just have to go around until you find one. Luckily, the second one did it for us. It's so strange. I mean, honestly, you can't make this stuff up. It's so shocking. So we went, got it. The husband applied the same day. The wife and the husband applied, boom, boom, back to back, same person. The husband's got accepted, and he got a Minnesota State ID 2 weeks later. The wife's didn't. We still don't know why. It just got booted. I don't know if somebody on the other end processed it who was different, but they rejected hers. And we spent, then we had to file for a variance for her and all these different things, which then took just as long as the process to get their work authorization cards. So all those things came in about the same time. But 4 to 5 months of wasted time where she could have been working. Now, they are a really exciting story because they had reasonably good English, not great, but kind of middle of the road English. They were super tenacious. I think they came to our office 65 times minimally that we recorded in the time, because they lived really close. So every time they had a problem, they'd just pop in. Again, trying to meet people where they are. And today, she has a job that pays $26 an hour. He has a job that pays $25 an hour. That's over $100,000 a year. So, and they have kids, so it's probably just enough because they're a family of 4. So back to asylum seekers. This is why I have to have notes, because I have so many thoughts. But asylum seekers come with none of that, and they're not eligible for any benefits of any sort ever until their asylum is approved. And as I just said, I've got somebody waiting for 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. I mean, that's typical. That is not out of the ordinary. If somebody I've seen a couple of Afghans get through faster, but it's not normal for that to happen. So they have to apply for that process, and then they just keep going through the process. About 150 days after you've applied for asylum, you can apply for a work authorization card. And then you have to wait another 30 to 60 days. They had been coming fairly quickly at the time we applied, so their work authorization cards came through pretty quickly. But in the past, I've heard people wait, months and months for that. But that's kind of the initial process. Whereas refugees come in with all those things already in place. They just can't lose any of them or have them sent back to the USCIS. I was going to tell you one other thing. Now I can't remember what it was. But it'll pop back in. Dick.
You don't have to be a trained social worker to volunteer. The people I helped, I taught them how to drive. I picked up people and drove them to daily work and then drove them back home. I mean, this is something anybody can do. And while I did all that, I taught them how to speak Minnesotan, don't you know?
It's true. What Dick says is true. There are a lot of variety of roles. The case management job does require pretty good computer skills and a lot of willingness to bother people on the phone and work through problems. And driving is one of the things that we do. More and more, we are helping people get to medical appointments, get to interviews, get to daily work. When the Afghans came in, we were serving people in Eden Prairie, Prior Lake, all over the place, and we had to find a way to get them to our office. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we started that. It also speaks to our other little dream, which is to get a car or two that we can practice drive with people. In theory, anybody can go out and do that, but the risk is that it's bad for daily work. It's a risk to us, because if you did get in an accident and you thought, gee, this is going to put my insurance way up, so I think daily work should cover this, then we're vulnerable there, because we all might have really good intentions, but then stuff happens and maybe it doesn't work out the way that we had anticipated. But if we own the car, then that's not as big a deal, because then the insurance goes with the car, and that's a covered kind of thing in the insurance world. And it poses less risk to us, because the car insurance, it doesn't go to daily works liability insurance, it goes to car insurance. But lessons cost, for a package of 3 lessons and somebody to get the car to take the test, is about $825. So, and let's face it, you can't learn how to drive with 3 lessons. You need hours behind the wheel. And if you don't know anyone who has a car and you are new here, it's very hard. So that's a huge deal. And one thing that we've actually done a lot of, because we have a partner called Microgrants who will give us money for those things. But practice driving, we have to apply for it, and it's a limited pool of money. But that's been really effective at getting probably several dozen of our job seekers driving lessons and at least somebody to take the test with them. And it's so funny because people have no idea how this, I've had, somebody like, I think it might have been Marva, but she called me up one morning and she said, I'm at the driver's station to take my test, she said, but I didn't know I had to bring somebody else's car. I'm like, oh. So I raced up to the DVS, we took her test. I don't think she passed the first time, but these are things that just...
Yeah, they think they're going to apply, the car will be there when I get there.
Exactly, right? I mean, and that makes sense if you think about it, So there's just more barriers than you can imagine, and it's really rewarding work. I mean, it's really amazing to see what people can do and how they contribute to our communities. And we just take the approach that when everybody can, have a chance to reach their potential and do the things that matter to them and make their lives whole, that's good for all of us.
So I think that is a really good place for Julie to stop. It's almost 1:30, and I think she may stay around if more of you would like to talk to her or have other questions. And next month is another special month for us. Larry will be playing his annual music concert, and then we have the picnic in June. So 2 more events for this year. So thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
If you wanna go visit Julie at work, you better call her first, 'cause she's usually out beating the drum looking for funds.